Day-26.
Day-26. I kicked off the day by coding a logistic regression from scratch in VS Code. I started by creating a logistic regression class to keep everything modular. The first function I wrote was the Sigmoid activation, the core of logistic regression, which maps any real-valued input to a probability between 0 and 1. Next, I implemented the compute_loss function using binary cross-entropy so the model can measure how far its probability predictions are from the true labels. After that, I wrote the fit method. First, I initialized the parameters, weights and bias, then entered the gradient descent loop. Each iteration of the loop did the following in order. 1. Compute the linear model z equals w x plus b. 2. Apply the sigmoid to z to get probabilities. 3. Compute gradients of a loss with respect to the parameters. 4. Update the parameters using those gradients and the learning rate. And 5. Record the loss so I could print progress and inspect convergence. I also defined a predict function that converts predicted probabilities to class labels with a 0.5 threshold. Probability greater than 0.5 returns 1, else 0. When visualizing the output on a 2D dataset, the decision boundary appears as a straight separating line, which can be intuitively understood by treating the x-axis as hours studied and the y-axis as hours slept, where students who studied more and slept well fall on one side of the line and are classified as high-performing, while students who studied less or slept excessively fall on the other side, even though the underlying model is still learning probabilities through an S-shaped sigmoid function. After coding, I moved to Quant prep. I covered 6 pricing/return functions and how they connect. Bond pricing functions compute the present value of a bond's future coupon payments and principal using the appropriate discount rate. Mortgage and loan pricing functions price amortizing loans by summing the present value of scheduled payments and usually produce an amortization schedule showing principal versus interest over time. Preferred stock pricing treats fixed dividends like a perpetuity, so price is almost equal to dividend/required return, adjusted for risk and call features. Common stock pricing, e.g., dividend discount models or cash flow forecasts, estimates the present value of expected future dividends or free cash flows and can be extended with growth assumptions. Portfolio return functions compute the weighted average return of assets in a portfolio and are paired with variance/covariance to evaluate risk-adjusted returns. Forward pricing functions connect spot price, interest rates, and carrying costs to give the forward price for delivery at a future date. Conceptually, forward is almost equal to spot adjusted for cost of carry. I used Gemini to explore how these formulas relate to each other, asked follow-ups, and then consolidated everything into notes while consulting my Quant textbook for more depth. Next, I attended my daily reading session and continued Einstein, His Life and Universe by Walter Isaacson. In this chapter, Isaacson explores Einstein's deeply conflicted relationship with fame. He strongly resented the constant public attention that intruded on his solitude and disrupted his scientific concentration. Yet at the same time, he clearly recognized and strategically used the influence fame granted him to speak out on important social, moral, and political issues of his era. His second wife, Elsa, played a significant role in managing the public and social dimensions of his life, and even transformed public curiosity into charitable contributions by charging for photographs and donating the proceeds. The chapter also sheds light on Einstein's evolving views on identity and politics. While not religious in a traditional sense, the rapid rise of anti-Semitism in Germany compelled him to embrace a stronger Jewish identity and actively support Zionist efforts, both as a moral stand against injustice and as an expression of solidarity with Jews facing persecution. After reading, I returned to trading. I've just recovered from losing my 8th funded trading account last Friday, so I decided to step back and rebuild discipline on a demo account first. Discipline means trading as if I only had a small I balance, sizing every position to a fixed % risk and following rules regardless of account size. During today's session, I traded XAU/USD gold as usual. An adrenaline-fueled impulse caused me to enter one trade in which I knew that this is not the right time to enter. I should wait for the market to reverse and manipulate first, but I entered and that hit my stop loss, costing about $1,200, a tough hit to confidence. I waited, watched the market, then re-entered with strict position, sizing, and rules. The second trade cut that loss down, so my net loss after the second trade was about $568. That partial recovery felt like a moral boost. I followed the rules and limited the damage. While trading, I also took the time to write notes on the 6 quant functions I'd studied earlier. Bond pricing function. What it does, converts a bond's future coupon payments and principal into a single present value. Specialty, fixed income valuation and sensitivity to changes in yields. Why it matters. Helps you judge interest rate risk, duration, and whether bonds or bond-like instruments are good hedges or carry trades alongside your spot/futures positions. Useful when funding costs or macro move change market structure. Mortgage/loan pricing, amortizing payment. What it does, gives the fixed periodic payment that repays principal plus interest over time and shows how interest versus principal amortize. Specialty, loan cash flow scheduling and effective borrowing cost. Why it matters. Critical for sizing leverage positions and understanding how margin/financing eats into returns. Use it to simulate worst-case carry and to set sensible leverage limits. Preferred stock pricing. What it does, values a security that pays a fixed dividend indefinitely, behaving like a perpetual income instrument. Specialty, hybrid equity with bond-like cash flow stability and equity-like risk. Why it matters. Helps you compare yield to risk across income assets and decide when to rotate capital between income instruments and risky trades. Useful for income-targeted allocations or hedges. Common stock valuation, Gordon growth/DCF idea. What it does, estimates intrinsic value by forecasting future cash flows or dividends and discounting them back to today. Specialty, captures growth expectations and required return trade-offs. Why it matters. Anchors long-term views and prevents overpaying for momentum. Use it to sanity check swing/position trades that depend on fundamental narratives. Portfolio return function. What it does, aggregates individual asset returns into an expected portfolio return and shows how variances and correlations determine portfolio risk. Specialty, risk attribution and diversification math. Why it matters. Lets you measure how a new trade changes your overall volatility and tail exposure. So you can size positions so the whole account stays within your risk limits rather than gambling on one ticket. Forward pricing/cost of carry function. What it does, relates spot price to the fair forward/futures price by accounting for financing costs and income, like dividends or convenience yield. Specialty, futures and forward valuation and basis analysis. Why it matters. Directly relevant to XAU/USD and other futures-based trades. It tells you whether the futures market is pricing in carry, storage, or funding stress, and where simple arbitrage or trade timing might exist. Use it to decide between spot, futures, or cash and carry approaches. In the DSA lecture, we revised graphs for the final time by walking through 2 core problems, flood fill and core schedule. Flood fill asks us to replace the color of a starting cell in every orthogonally connected cell that shares the same original color. The lecture emphasized the classic DEFS/BFS strategy. Check bounds, compare with the original color, mark visited, and replace the color. In the worst case, you may visit every cell. So time complexity is O, rows times calls. Core schedule frames prerequisites as directed edges and asks whether you can finish all courses, which reduces to cycle detection in a directed graph. The lecture explained Kahn's algorithm, topological sort via Undegrees, repeatedly remove nodes with Undegrees 0 and decrement neighbors, and the DFS recursion stack approach, mark nodes on the current recursion path to detect back edges. By the end of class, the problem statements and their canonical approaches were clear. For the implementation phase, I switched over to my LeetCode terminal and translated the lecture concepts directly into clean, executable code. I began with flood fill, following the classic and reliable approach, storing the original color, traversing the grid using a stack or queue, DFS/BFS, carefully skipping out of bounds or already processed cells, and repainting only those cells that match the original color. The flow of the algorithm felt intuitive. The edge cases were handled correctly, and the solution passed all test cases exactly as expected. I then moved on to core schedule, where I deliberately implemented 2 independent solutions to deeply reinforce the underlying idea of cycle detection in graphs. First, I applied a con-style topological sort, building the adjacency list and in-degree array, pushing all in-degree 0 nodes into a queue, processing them sequentially, and confirming that the final process count matched the total number of courses, ensuring no cycles existed. To complement this, I also implemented a DFS-based approach using visited and recursion stack markers to detect back edges and identify cycles directly. Both solutions were tested in the terminal, submitted on LeetCode, and accepted without issues. I wrapped up the session by saving screenshots of the accepted runs, a satisfying confirmation that the concept had genuinely clicked and translated into working code. Next up was language practice, where I extended my Spanish streak to day 359, reinforcing consistency over comfort. Today I added a handful of new words and phrases to my vocabulary: proyecto, project, a site, oil, estupendo, wonderful, la última vez for the final time, and saludar, to wave. I practiced them through short exercises and conversation drills, focusing on recall, pronunciation, and natural usage. By the end of the session, the effort paid off as I climbed out of the demotion zone and back into the stable zone on the leaderboard. Tomorrow's objective is clear: push into the promotion zone and keep the streak alive. I wrapped up day 26 with a push workout at the gym, a focused, intentional chest and shoulder session. The workout consisted of 3 sets of incline chest press and 3 sets of cable chest flies for chest, followed by 3 sets of cable lateral raises and 3 sets of rear delt flies for shoulders. I skipped front delts and the flat bench due to lingering shoulder soreness, but despite that limitation, the session delivered a strong pump and felt controlled, efficient, and productive throughout. That's everything for day 26. Thanks for watching.
The network awakens. Intelligence takes form. Undegreed. The signature remains.